Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 2026 Religious Studies Roetzel Family Lecture. So for those who don't know me, my name is Katherine, and I am the director of the Religious Studies program. Since 2011, this annual lecture has been the marquee event for our program, bringing exceptional scholars of religion to the University of Minnesota to share thoughtful, creative, and boundary-pushing scholarship with our community. Tonight promises to be all of those things. But in order to understand this, appreciate, and celebrate the Roetzel Family Lecture, a brief history is necessary on the Religious Studies program at the U. So we are an interdepartmental program with 48 core and affiliate faculty representing 17 different departments. And we are growing. Last year, we added a fantastic scholar of early Islam, who is here today, and I'm thrilled to announce that we will have a scholar of Buddhism joining us in the fall. We offer a major and minor in religious studies, a minor in Islamic studies, and a graduate minor. And I know that many of our current students are here this evening, so I want to thank them for being here and recognize the great work that they're doing. We are very fortunate this evening to be joined by many individuals who have played a crucial role in creating and expanding the Religious Studies program. And these are people without whom we simply would not exist. So I want to briefly acknowledge two vital figures. So first, my predecessor as Director of Religious Studies, Jeannie Kildee, who worked tirelessly to create the exciting Religious Studies program that we have today. And thank you, Jeannie, for all that you have done and for all that you continue to do for religious studies. And the second person that I want to acknowledge is the person who helped start the Religious Studies program and also generously endowed this lecture series, Cal Roetzel. So Cal, you get a round of applause too. Not only was Cal instrumental in the creation of the Religious Studies program, but he remains our most ardent supporter, believing that this field of study remains crucially important in such times as these. And we were just talking about this yesterday. In particular, he remains committed to its success with incredible generosity in funding a variety of endeavors, from this lecture to the curricular revision that we are currently doing, and his real passion, which is student research. And so today, I am thrilled to announce that we have launched the Roetzel Family Religious Studies Research Scholarships for undergraduate summer research. We are very excited to provide financial support for our students as they explore religion across a variety of places and time periods. To that end, I should note for our students that applications for the summer research funding are due on April 1st, so please get those applications in. Cal, you mean so much to this program, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for all you have done and continue to do for religious studies. 3 rounds of applause. Before we introduce tonight's esteemed speaker, we also sincerely appreciate the support of our co-sponsors, the Departments of English, Cultural Studies and Comparative Literature, Philosophy, History, and the program in the History of Science, Technology, and Medicine. So the format for tonight is as follows. Dr. Modern will share his presentation. And afterwards, we will have a Q&A. I will start things off and ask 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll open it up to the rest of the audience and have a conversation. After our discussion this afternoon, there will be refreshments just outside this room, so please stay for a few moments, meet with Dr. Modern, and connect with people both familiar and new. So, now our speaker. John Modern is Arthur and Katherine Shadek Professor of the Humanities and Religious Studies at Franklin and Marshall College. Modern teaches classes on American religious history, literature, science, technology, and aesthetics. Former editor at large for The Imminent Frame, he co-curated Frequencies and co-edits Class 200 New Studies in Religion, both with Katherine Lofton, who was here last month. Modern is the author of Secularism in Antebellum America, The Bop Apocalypse, and Neuromatic, or A Particular History of Religion and the Brain. And he is currently working on the Book of Akron, a project that explores the end of the world through the history of rubber. Modern is also producing a multimedia project on religion, Machines in Between, funded by the Henry Luce Foundation and the Center for Sustained Engagement with Lancaster. Today, Dr. Modern will share with us The Religion of AI Observed, Reflection on a Season of Revival, a timely, important, exciting, and disconcerting topic for this moment. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Modern to the University of Minnesota. Thank you.
Thank you, Katherine, for that introduction. How's everybody doing out there? It's good to see you. Thank you, Katherine. Thank you for all the people who have been integral to hosting me this couple days here in Minneapolis. I've had a great time. Nathaniel has been a great host. Joel, our sound tech. Cal and the Roetzel family for funding this. It's a wonderful thing to sort of celebrate religious studies and the kind of creative edge I think it gives possibility to. And also thank you to the Religious Studies program and all the affiliate programs who sponsored this as well. I'd also give a shout out here at the beginning. This is a multimedia presentation that was aided and abetted by my co-conspirators at the Institute of the Mechanical Surround at Franklin Marshall College. Those include Libby Modern, Vincent Smaldone, aka DJ Image, and Nikki Kroll. So with that said, I'll begin. The power and presence of AI in our lives. There we go, sorry. The power and presence of AI in our lives are not only the mathematics, the algorithms, or the devices, nor is AI just an evolving crime scene of intellectual property theft, nor does it simply reify our enthusiasm for the solitary pleasures of the screen. On the contrary, AI is all of these things and more. The power and presence of AI is not singular, but relational and distributive. It is a matter of connection and saturation, of threading through and across, a discourse that makes its way underneath the skin, a political economy fueled by proclivities for authoritarianism, an epistemology that trades in empty spectacle, the specific sites of extraction and local exploitations animating the atmosphere that we all live in and through. AI-driven systems and the screens that facilitate them operate according to paradigmatic theories of neural networks and information processing. At the conceptual level, these screens and these systems assume the human to be the sum of its relations, a complex, self-organizing system that processes information. At the material level, the screens and the large language models they mediate have been trained to scrape the relations of the individual, relations to their friends, families, celebrities, a particular pair of shoes, a particular type of kink, and they have been trained to parse the sum of these relations for patterns, ranging from the obvious to heretofore unrecognized. At the experiential level then, screen cycles of capture and extraction are the pulsing heart of this brain-centric leviathan, now being constructed through generative AI and the large language models that surround us. Neural networks are no longer simply in our brains. On the contrary, neural networks are now the product of massive feats of human engineering and capitalization. This moment is part and parcel to what I have previously called a history of the neuromatic brain. The neuromatic paradigm has long inspired those who fund, build, and dream of machines that might capture the all but infinite complexity of the world, that could process what they had captured and could then recognize deep and abiding patterns about the world and each of its parameters. At present, there is much money afoot, not to mention technological and political power, invested in a day when pretty much everything will be understood, taught, and talked about according to the intelligence of artificial neural networks. There is an overdetermined and often desperate will to believe in the algorithm. Indeed, many a wager has been made not so much on superintelligence, but on generative AI soon generating the categories of thought and the grooves of our sociality. Why so much desire to be convinced that its intelligence is set apart and worthy of our prostrations before it? One is reminded here of Charles Chauncey's acidic remark about the stirring claims coming out of colonial Northampton at the epicenter of the so-called First Great Awakening. These don't look like the fruit of the extraordinary discoveries of God, quipped Chauncey, but they are the very things which may be expected when men's passions are raised to an extraordinary height without a proportional degree of light in their understanding, unquote. AI systems in their massive complexity and capacities for surveillance and prediction approach the criteria that humans have long used to imagine divinity. And this, to be sure, is salient sociological and psychological data. But these systems are not divine, at least not in a Chauncey or Edwards way. They are rather discursive, utterly human. They are systems of probabilistic mimicry that are ever improving their odds of imitating us as humans, in turn, imitate their imitators. The subject of artificial intelligence is an opportunity to draw inspiration from the study of religion in order to make the sense of a rather disturbing turn in our secular age. A moment when humans increasingly imagine themselves vis-a-vis AI systems and other computational forms imagining them. Although the computational abstractions that enable this loop are bedazzling, the looping itself is a materialist and even biological process. Algorithms monitoring and predicting and managing and mining metadata to measure the collective production of values and to extract a sort of network surplus value. Algorithms continuously learning from the humans who are learning from them. This afternoon's talk doubles down on the looping of structure and agency by insisting on the reality of religion as a social and psychic construction. Rather than dismiss the enthusiasms of AI as fantasy or unreal or neurotic or false consciousness, this talk is part of a larger project that approaches AI by way of the human mechanics of its making, empirical and political struggles, the blood and sweat of rationalities undergirding the linguistic power, the affective attachments, the social imaginaries, the psychosexual politics, the epistemic hegemonies. The digging into the instability and historicity of institutions and worldviews and people who claim at some level a mantle of sacred legitimacy, well, this tracks for the future study of AI. And it tracks too for getting a critical handle on the inevitable effects of AI training on the human practice of intelligence. I'm a worried man, and I worry about the diminishing of future conversations about religion. Conversations being squeezed by scarcity and ideology, conversations becoming aesthetically flat, repetitive, ethically obtuse, or devoid of a withering reflexivity. In other words, conversations producing knowledge ready-made for use in training data sets for AI-driven systems. Consequently, ours is a moment that demands new vocabularies of analysis and registers of critique. How else to begin to hack the large language models and the human enterprises that seek to calcify in order to instrumentalize their common sense about religion and much else besides?
I think I missed that. Sorry. Here we go.
Good afternoon. I am an historian from the future, and I am here to set the stage. By the early decades of the 21st century, artificial neural networks had taken over. Set off by the consequential integration of the logical calculus of McCulloch and Pitts in Claude Shannon's mathematical theory of communication, the epistemological grooves of large language models were refined into what historian John Modern called the neuromatic paradigm. From heavy assemblies and primitive vector machines like the Mark I perceptron, to the development in parallel distributed processing, to the revolution of graphics processing units that enormously increased the power and accuracy of neural networks. By 2030, AI-driven systems had inaugurated themselves into almost every aspect of how humans related to themselves, others, and the world around. And by the end of the century, the project was complete. And while debates continue to rage over how to understand the precise mechanism and political economy of this algorithmic revolution, all involved agreed that humans, at that particularly vulnerable moment, were living through a long season of revival. For ever since the great work of artificial neural networks was wrought, there has been a great abiding alteration of this world in many respects. There has been vastly more conviction, faith, apocalypticism, discipline, ritual, myth-making, wild claims, and even stranger self-imaginings as neural networks have made their way into our lives. Under AI-driven conditions of capital, work and social life increasingly revolved around the delirious and contagious desire to make each and every moment, each thing or place, each person and relationship into an object of algorithmic capture and cultic commodification. Nothing in all of creation was hidden from the AI-driven systems being imagined and built during these heady days of AI adoption. All had become a burnt-over district. Such ferment was endlessly dissected and denigrated and celebrated in the moment. A pattern emerged in these early days of consideration, rhetorical effusions and explanations that evoked the language of religion and the archives of religious history. There was talk of a mutation in Christianity. Feel the AGI, a revival cry for transcendence chanted by employees in the early days of OpenAI over 100 years ago, captured the technophilic zeal in some quarters as work began in earnest to create a god in the image of the human. The first glimmers of this new religious order sprung up from immortalism and cryobiology to effective altruist, tech accelerationist, and the AGI theism of the Silicon Valley elite. During these early moments of AI revival, religion also became a technical horizon. Tons of cash fueled competition to train artificial neural networks to measure, understand, replicate, and eventually predict religion. And religion, to Vec, emerged victorious. Slickly marketed and strategically placed, Religion to Vec was the brainchild of Infinity 88 and leveraged knowledge about religion for teaching, training, and discipline, for political advantage and populist fury, for policy consideration and public relations, for legal adjudication and neuromarketing, for military intelligence and penetrating markets, for self-help podcast and drugs, promising to transpose one's boredom, anxiety, depression, all into more blissful keys.
Hi there. How are you? How you doing? How are you? Come on, give me something. Hello. Good to see you. Good to see everyone. I know you're all here for a launch, so I will just get right down to it. The idea of identifying, let alone collecting and ingesting the entirety of religion, past and present, is hard to imagine. Very, very hard to imagine, but imagine we must. Imagine the archive of the world's religions and their histories made readily accessible to you in a single application. Imagine never having to think again about everything you want to know about religion, spirituality, the fate of God and law. Imagine a multimodal personal assistant applying its intelligence across different sensory and epistemic domains. Imagine a machine that achieves total and coordinated capture of the spiritual and the metaphysical, the biological and material environments, the ideas and practices that together comprise religion. Imagine a tool for embedding many registers, varieties, and worlds of religion into multi-dimensional vector spaces. Imagine a device for retrieving an all-encompassing answer to any question you may have that has anything to do, or not, with religion. Imagine all the possible data points of religion being put into communication with one another, all the words for all the gods in all the languages, sacred texts, curses, myths, iconography, clips of cuneiform script, pictures of the Serpent Mound of Peebles, Ohio, and forged engravings of Moloch, religious rhythms and Siberian throat singing, seance tapes and snake handling testimony, recipes, recitations, the logic of ritual movement, and the choreography of the penitent and the pious. All the data of religion scraped, enumerated, incorporated, and arranged in a head-spinning array of statistical configurations. You no longer have to imagine, because religion Tvek is here. Experts from around the world have contributed to this revolutionary technology. Coders, cognitive scientists, venture capitalists, data entry analysts, archivists, librarians, curators, religious celebrities, and everyday laity, spiritual thought-fluencers from around the world, and the rabid secular critics. Together, our team has developed, designed, and engineered into being the virtually living world of religion Tvek. Together, we have discovered the hidden grammar for how something called religion works at the granular level. And together, for the first time, we are on the cusp of encountering the universal features of the human and securing practical advice in how we all might live our best religious life. Indeed, the genius of religion Tvek lies in our ability to see across the whole of reality as if it were a flat Texas plain. Our undisclosed training techniques perfect this fungibility across modalities through richer and more efficient integration of data streams, feature fusions, and leveraging self-attention mechanisms, all in order to secure natural, nonlinear, and multidimensional connections between tokens from different modalities. What scholars call ontological, we call self-evident. And now, I will hand over the mic to our chief engineer, Amber Trinzel. Amber, welcome. It's kind of fun. Hold on, I'm getting it. Here we go. There we are. Here's Amber. Hi, I'm Amber. It's good to see you. Embedding is an essential part of how we train a large language model like religion Tvek. Embedding is a part of a long trend in operations research and applied cybernetics of managing the mass effects of many variables. As a general proposition, the process of machine learning is, as we all know, a miracle. Millions of unique inputs graphed in terms of hundreds or even thousands of dimensions each, the relationship between each dimension given an adjustable weight, each dimension encapsulating a specific facet or trait of the world or data point, and every word or data point associated with a unique multi-dimensional vector. The first decision made by the supervisors training religion Tvek is to define religion and to limit its archives, words, images, sounds, and sensory data. A clean training data set is constructed that will then guide the algorithm on its evolutionary journey, which will then learn why and how to represent religion to you, translating its statistical model into something you can understand and digest in just one sitting. We do the work, the hard work of knowing religion, so you don't have to. We have determined what words, images, sounds, and gestures will be designated as standard-oriented and exemplary of the essence of religion. Each input expressing more than one thing at once, more than is conceivable in the muck of flesh and blood reality, but pleasingly imagined in mathematical form. thousands of hours of code retreats addressing the mechanics of reducing religiosity in a computationally efficient way, all hands meetings about how to adjust each data point to a consistent logic of the religious secular continuum. For before writing the first line of code, we've established a system to distinguish the myriad differences and continuities between, say, the cult of Artagatus and Dura Europas, Rabbinic Judaism during the Babylonian period, German Protestantism between 1788 and 1914, a MAGA rally in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and the Obatala religious community amidst the Yoruba of southwestern Nigeria. All manner of distinctions would have to be considered in the service of parsing religious difference. All the differences, every single one, varying levels of social complexity, divergent notions of time, space, and divinity, different imaginations of political order, the range of approaches to and investments in the disabled and care for the elderly, discrepancies in educational infrastructures, and rules around gendered access, different densities of adherence to bureaucratic structures, different degrees to which religion is public-facing and missionary-minded, different attitudes toward orality and warfare, puberty and time, grammar and deity restrictions, different sacred sites made out of different materials, with a range of aesthetic choices coordinated with funerals and supernatural beings and or near-human spirits and or dreams and or divinations and or sacrifice and or pilgrimage. All these differences forever and ever and so on and so forth.
Well, we seem to have lost Amber, but that's okay. I could just pick up where they left off, because I am an historian from the future. In any case, the training of religion to Vec began as a word-to-Vec operation, wherein the task was to translate the world's history of religious words, paragraphs, and entire documents into numerical data. Thousands of semantic and non-semantic features of words, snippets, and text represented as vectors, patterns discerned, a grammar of religious language proposed, promises of knowing the machine, promises of knowing the meaning of particular words, snippets, or text by way of the relationship with the entirety of the data set, each letter, word, and phrase inheriting a position within a vectorial space with thousands of dimensions. Yahweh, ritual, Allahu Akbar, hallelujah, the corpus of Madame Blavatsky, nuns, nunnery, and negative theology, supplicant, incense, chakra, beatitudes, the Unabomber Manifesto, the Upanishads, the 95 Theses, the Book of Mormon, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, books about religion, and books about the books about religion, the First Amendment, and an Eli, Eli, Lama, Lama, Sabachthani saxophone cry that shivered the cities down to the last radio. Images were next, as the world's religions were arranged in terms of shapes, pixels, and semantic tags and turned into high-dimensional vectors to be mapped in their limitless relationality. The archives of spirit photography, papal insignias, and seminal patchworks, the scripts of Hebrew, Arabic, and Sanskrit, the Paleolithic paintings in the caves of Lascaux, swastikas, UFOs, icons, hex signs of the Pennsylvania Dutch, talismans of conjurers on the plains of Missouri, the architectural flourishes of the monasteries of Mount Athos, every stained glass depicting a station of the cross, mandalas across millennia, the prayer cards of Mark Mothersbaugh, ashen foreheads, Kali statues, Scientology cufflinks, and the single photon emission computed tomography scans of blood flow patterns in the brain when speaking in tongues, saying the Lord's Prayer, or thinking atheistically. Coders for Religion Direct then translated sound waves into numerical data and represented them as vectors, capturing the rhythm, pitch, tone, cadence, texture, timbre, dynamics, and semantic content of shofars, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, street preachers and televangelists, cantors, confessions and kadashim, pledges and vows and chants and wobbly translations of classic hymns into class anthems, speaking in tongues, call to prayers across the globe, shape note singers, nightly pujas, each song from each private pressing gospel album that still exists.
Hey there, Mr. History. Hold on one second. You're forgetting some things. We also surveyed the kinetic and biological domains of all known religious activity, vectorizing them for the purposes of analysis and prediction. Using multidimensional motion sensors, fields of acceleration, angular velocity, and orientation were each processed and transformed into vectors. And in process, with affectiva, Religion Direct measured the standard arc of involuntary eye movements of spirituals sitting around a table conjuring the dead in Lilydale, New York. Every blink, drifting gaze, side eye, and pupil dilation, patented olfactometers accounted for the smell of over-chlorinated baptismals, Protestant potluck basements, and the citrusy tinge of Florida water when the spirits are fed at the edge of Port-au-Prince. We developed wearable sensors to measure brain waves, heart rate, sweating, and blood pressures of participants in a Wiccan espot. The pain-related patterns of the Palo Penitentes as they whip themselves on Good Friday. Our motion sensors track the movements outward and inward of sun dancers and the local variations of the Sigmund Crucis, the gaze of Pentecostal preachers, and the brushstrokes of calligraphers, the self-organizing logic of millions circumambulating the Kaaba, the customer routes at Hobby Lobby, and the flapping patterns of a live chicken twirling around one's head on Caparot. Each of these models of religious knowledge were then cross-referenced in multimodal configurations, each domain of knowledge about religion structured as an artificial neural network, each of the vectors in each of the systems communicating with one another with massive simultaneity. Networks within networks, the subtle energies of vibrating vectors forever and ever. Amen.
Okay, I'm back. It's good to keep in mind, though, that however impressive a Religion Direct chatbot might appear, it is an act of human making. So when the coders of Religion Direct decide how many hidden layers and the number of neurons there should be in each, they are also deciding the number of features, right? The number of features for which each data point can be coded. The hyperparameters is empirically optimized at the beginning in order to capture the most significant complexities and pattern manifestations between the data of religion, but not every possible relationship, just the ones that count.
But what other ones would you expect to count? We know what we are counting and why. After all, we are in the business of counting. We repeatedly prompted Religion Direct, giving it various inputs over and over again. We tallied the outputs and considered the differentials. We slowly adjusted the values of the parameters through a process called backpropagation until Religion Direct began to give us satisfying results, very, very satisfying results. All of this is to say that the technicians of vector embedding are the unsung heroes of their world.
But hey, but the knowledge of religion to Vec, not to mention its coherent expression, depends upon translating meaning into a matter of statistical proximity between the internal properties of the learning corpus. It depends upon limiting the profusion of dimensionality from the very beginning. Coders reduce calculation costs by cutting corners, reifying some patterns as natural to the dataset, and aggregating categories whose value changes very little across the training sample. After inputting trillions of data points from the training set, the goal is to compress them statistically into something predictable, something manageable. Recognizable patterns of religious difference are to be operationalized.
Okay. Excuse me, we are currently involved in taking legal action against scurrilous claims such as those that our training of religion to Vec is a subjective matter. Specifically, we reject out of hand that choosing the dimensions, optimizing the hyperparameters, or tweaking the parameters accordingly reflects our own bias criteria. This is patently false. We readily concede that within multidimensional vector spaces, numerical parameters do not add up to a recognizable representation of the worlds they are modeling. Instead, vectors are relational parts of an infrastructure of algorithmic persuasion, a counterfactual simulation of a world in which referential meaning has been excluded. There is much to be admired in such practices of exclusion. It allows the human to shine through, not what we are, but what we could be.
But religion to Vec would be a congealing of secularism in the keys of lying and looting. For the success of religion to Vec would depend upon perpetuating and intensifying an initial state of common sense about religion. Indeed, religion to Vec might even be seen as the quintessential machine of the secular age, producing, promoting, and reifying differences between the religious and the secular, differences that are then used for the twin purposes of classification and extrapolation. Coding the categorical constellation of religion within a multidimensional space would make compatible, that is, fungible at the level of mathematics, all manner of differences. First and foremost, between the religious and the secular in all of its minute variations, all the while incorporating other differences, all the differences that in a sense make secular modernity make sense. The differences between belief and ritual, myth and history, faith and reason, men and women, black and white, self and other, natural and artificial, visible and invisible, rationality and madness, human and animal, etc. These differentials would then feed back into the human space, threading their way across the skin and synapse and weaving their way into consciousness. Differentials whose interconnected, interactive, and looping quality, ethereal as they may seem, generates powerful institutions and petty habits, routine rituals, and ideological regimes. Does that make sense? You know, a narrowing of human possibility?
Well, no, it does not make sense. Doesn't make any sense at all, right? Religion to Vec does not narrow. On the contrary, it has something for everyone. No matter who you are, we will meet you where you are at. Our engineers have already modified religion to Vec for different markets, applications, and demographics, from the spiritually curious and conspiracy-minded to the erstwhile Catholics, the stoned teenage seekers, scholars, and scientists, to the devotees, constitutional lawyers, journalists, and ministers of propaganda.
By 2030, it had already become obvious that, well, to some astute observers, that they were witnessing a generalization of the embedding process. Networks, words, contexts, films, phrases, meanings of words, codes, job skills, patient health records, molecular structures, DNA sequences, user interactions with products, etc.
This list, like the features of religion to Vec, was virtually endless, as different multidimensional vector spaces became vectors in other multidimensional vector spaces. For once the initial categories were identified and the weights adjusted, religion to Vec was set on its path toward knowing religion in such a way as to assure its human users that they did too.
Which is to say, not very well. If this sounds disconcerting or even threatening, it should. The disconcerting part may be that AI-driven systems such as Chat with God and the explosive growth of the so-called faith tech industry over the past year, AI Jesus on Twitch, prayer bots, or my favorite, Faith GPT, goes on forever. I could talk about this for a while. The rabbit hole of Faith GPT contains many truths about this moment that gesture beyond matters of religious consumption. I am worried about the threat of calcified language and the deadening of expressive edge. I am worried about threats, the threat of categories clicking into place and the ellipsing of complexity and ambiguity, the threat of those calcifications being passed on to the human habitus, the threat of those calcifications being used by tech oligarchs and other rapacious capitalists to manage populations. And on that front, I am worried about disembodied and frictionless knowledge becoming a script for governance. Okay, now I'm gonna get a little serious here. So as speculative as some of this critique might seem, the entrenchment of religion in terms of mathematical application and universalist aspiration is already happening, and the style of reasoning is recognizable. Take, for example, Pascal Boyer, a founding figure in the contemporary cognitive science of religion, who has made a career on claiming that cognitive inquiry and event-related fMRI studies have the power to transform religion from a mystery into a problem to be solved. Boyer dismisses humanistic inquiry into religion as incompatible with modeling. He calls it a lackadaisical approach to explaining religious thought and behavior that has become theoretically amorphous and unresponsive to actual scientific proposals, unquote. The solution, according to Boyer and his colleagues, is to take up the calling of the brain to explain itself to itself. That is, to offer an explanation of religion that conforms to the actual mechanics of cognitive processing. While not as expansive as the world embedded into religion to Vec, here is a model of religion that gets underneath the representations and manifestations of religion into its molecular parameters, religion reduced to Hebbian assemblies and the multidimensional relationality of neurons in the brain. Having defined major swaths of the research field for a generation, Boyer's cognitive view of religion lends itself to aspirations of vectorizing the human, called a mathematically sound approach to deconversion. For such a scientific understanding of religion would, in Boyer's estimation, go a long way in curing the so-called irrational and dysfunctional cognition that pervades religious adherence. For in Boyer's scheme, religion is a form of laziness or obsessive-compulsive pathology, or both. Having formed his fame and foothold in cognitive studies of religion during the War on Terror, a kind of secular paranoia laces Boyer's treatment of religion and recognition of such dysfunction. Not only did religious concepts and activities impinge on the potential to act willfully, but to quote Boyer, in an age of simmering Islamophobia, they, quote, hijacked our cognitive resources, unquote, from 2001. Boyer's cognitive model has now assumed a central place in the securitization of the world through technology. Indeed, the cognitive dysfunction of religion and its capacity to be vectorized has become primary concerns for those who seek to secure the world with their war on global terrorism. Scott Atran, for example, is a leading cognitive scientist and founder of Artists International, a nonprofit group that uses social science research to help resolve seemingly intractable political and cultural conflicts, unquote. Atrin and his team of researchers made a name for themselves in the Obama years by addressing the problem of the devoted actor and their naturally occurring and politically dangerous pathology. As Boyer puts it, Atrin's work is a brilliant exposition of empirical research into the psychology of religion. Devoted actors are people whose insanity is sanctioned by their communities, who, quote, adhere to sacred transcendental values that generate actions disassociated from rationally expected risks and rewards, unquote. Such actors are dangerous and unpredictable precisely because they fail to achieve their own version of agent of reason. Having failed to negotiate the communal pressures on them, their ego collapses and becomes vulnerable. Devoted actors, then, are a product of insufficient execution of their own agency and an overinvestment in the agency of divinities that define the coherence of their local communities. According to Atrin, this is why devoted actors have such crazy thoughts and want to kill us. Rather than being an effect, let's say, of calculating cost and consequences, or enacting a vision of just war, or rationally engaged in an act of self-defense, the actions of terrorists have been the result of, quote, costly commitment to idiosyncratic and apparently absurd beliefs and associated values, cued by sartorial and corporeal markers, veils, beards, and especially more indelible marks, such as the zabibah on the forehead of pious Muslims, generated by repeated friction with the prayer mat, unquote. In the fall of 2024, Atrin and his team of researchers announced the following initiative to combat transnational terrorism, quote, based on findings from our behavioral and brain research on the will to fight, Artis, has developed a DoD-supported programmable AI reader that filters at scale in near real-time open-source internet data curated in terms of the devoted actor framework, unquote. Atrin's work is part of an infusion of AI into the field of cognitive warfare. Atrin's deep and multivalent knowledge, religion, cognitive science, human psychology, military strategy, it's ready-made. It's ready-made for a moment when the arts of cognitive warfare use AI to create hyper-realistic disinformation, perform deep psychometric dives into psychological profiles, and to automate influence campaigns on an unprecedented scale. A rapidly expanding discipline, cognitive warfare is an unconventional form of warfare that, quote, uses cyber tools to alter enemy cognitive processes, exploit mental biases, provoke thought distortions, influence decision makers, and hinder actions, unquote. The initial goal is to, quote, have lasting, even irreversible effects on the cognitive personality, that is, the way in which an individual processes information, unquote. The long-term goal then is to create epistemic closure for targeted populations and proactive epistemic sovereignty for the victors. Understanding the religious quality, at least for Atrin, of group rejection and personal resentment, he argues, is the key to coming to terms with its powerful hold and countering it with alternative programming. Atrin is now claiming to be developing AI-driven systems for the purposes of identifying those who would harbor grievance, and in order to persuade them to think and act otherwise. Moving beyond an instrumental and utilitarian approach, Atrin is embracing AI to, quote, explain, predict, and prevent transnational terrorism and extreme political conflict. Through a real-time effects monitor, Atrin promises to track and target the shifting relationships among political players, warfighters, and the general population. Atrin has cast his lot with the future of cyber war and militarized surveillance. His machine learning algorithms do two things. One, they read viral and enduring messages in social media and the information space, and two, they produce viral messaging of their own with AI in order to, quote, impede foreign-supported malign information operations, unquote. Atrin paints a future when devoted actors can be broken down to their component parts for the purposes of understanding and managing their will to fight in lethal conflicts, unquote. The potential for knowledge to proliferate that is ready-made for applied surveillance is real enough. Large language models trained and the knowledge produced by folks like Boyer and Atran will certainly fetch a high price. For the will to vectorization is here and everywhere around us. And as knowledge as such, knowledge, right? Knowledge understood capaciously from the maintenance of archives to the conditions of judgment, and as knowledge as such comes under the sway of statistical probability, reductive accounts of religion and other registers of human being will continue to assume a perverse and violent legitimacy. For the more we buy into the practice, the more we buy into the practice and the claim that artificial neural networks can animate a non-isomorphic model of the world for the purpose of prediction, the more accurate those predictions will become. We will have made the intelligence of artificial neural networks true, having wholly bought into a notion of intelligence as predicting the contextual data given a center data point or vice versa. A Carney-Barker back and forth that works well enough for enough people enough of the time. Let's call it the age of unthinking, of submitting to an unimaginable relationality, of never having to think alone again.
John promised me the final word here, so I'm just going to say one more thing to wrap things up. Religion to Vec has been developed with the express purpose of optimizing your approach to all things sacred and profane. We know religion like no one has ever known religion before. You can trust us to be your guide, to inaugurate the spirituality of you and for you, generating a new religion through religion and in you, because you can trust us to analyze the rhythms of your keystrokes, your private search histories, your movement around the house, your heartbeat and your face. Your cognitive state content is precious to us, as are the emotional intensity metrics that we generate in your name. Together, we will provide holistic and personalized solutions to complex problems. Let's just say that we are now able to gauge your emotions through our intelligence and then, wait for it, to be able to perfectly meet your mood and to tailor the wisdom of all the world's religions to your favor. Just imagine a therapist who is also your patron saint, your guardian angel, your confessor, your sage and omniscient life coach. And if you choose, we can also prescribe rituals that you might perform at your convenience or have the privilege of ignoring. So, turn on the unique, patented seeker mode, and Religion to Vec will become your own guru. Once you purchase and properly install the mobile sensor package on your person, mass amounts of data will be captured, cross-referenced with all the data that came before, and put through the sieve of what amounts to a black box more mysterious than all the religious mysteries combined. We did the math. Heretofore, unknown patterns will be recognized about you and the world at large. And these new patterns, these deepest of structures, will give rise to a new reality of you. So let us pause to appreciate the inauguration. Here's to help creating an infinite variety of new religions perfectly suited to our new age. Each person, their own religion, a uniformity of difference, the age of you and me, the age of everybody, the age of us, the age of religion to Vec, the age of you and me, the age of everybody, the age of us, the age of religion to Vec, age of you and me, the age of everybody, the age of us, age of religion, the age and me, the age of everybody, the age of us, the age of religion.